So, hey everyone, my name is Chris, and I'm here to talk to you guys about GitHub Pages today. So, if you've been following along with the restart of the curriculum the past few weeks, we had Caitlin come in to talk to us about HTML. Autumn talked to us about CSS. Stuart told us about some basic good design principles. And putting all that together, Matt showed us how to make a portfolio site. So now you have an index.html file, on your computer. You can double-click it, and it opens up in your browser. So what now? You want to share it with, a portfolio with potential employers or, or your friends and family. So you'll want to put your site up on the internet. And when we do this, we generally have two main ways of doing so. The first is web hosting services such as GoDaddy and Bluehost. And for these services, you sign up an account on their service. You just upload your HTML, CSS. They give you a link, and yeah, that's basically how they work. And the other way is cloud servers. So what these do, they give you a blank Linux virtual machine, and you can set up all the server from scratch. You can choose what language you want to write your backend in if you're writing a more complex application. And so there are several pros and cons with each of these methods. As I said, with web hosting, these are fairly simple. You just upload, and you're basically done. And they're usually pretty good about being reliable about keeping your site online. And with cloud server, you get to write everything from scratch, right? And so the cons are fairly debatable, but we are only concerned with one con that is common between both of these, and that it costs money. And we don't like to pay for things if we can avoid them. And so, and especially if you're still starting off and you're still looking for your first job, you may not want to incur any more monthly payments than you might need. And so what's the solution? As you may have guessed from the topic of today's talk, it is GitHub Pages. So before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about what GitHub is. Has anyone here used GitHub? All right. We should have more hands than that, but that's fine. We'll get there. So the first thing that we should keep in mind is that GitHub is not Git. All right? Can we all repeat that? GitHub is not Git. Right, all right, that's a really important part. GitHub uses Git, and it helps you to manage your projects, but it's not Git. It has Git in the name. And so one of the things that GitHub is that it's a place that you can store your projects. And this serves one as a good backup tool, right? If for some reason your hard drive on your computer dies, all your code is still safely stored up on GitHub. You get a new computer or you change your hard drive, and all your stuff is still there. Actually, and another way is if you work between two different machines very often. So at school, I'll be working on my laptop, and when I go home, I'll work on my desktop. And this makes it that I can work on the same project across both machines without having to use a USB key, kind of copy all the stuff over, plug it up, pull it out, plug it in, copy the stuff over, work on it, copy it back. That's just a lot of a hassle. Or some people use email, they zip it up, email it back and forth. That's also a hassle. And so, yeah, GitHub will help you move your project back and forth really easily. And so another feature is that GitHub serves as kind of a graphical interface for a lot of Git features. When you get to use some of the more advanced functionality of Git, especially at workplace with merging code, branching, pull requests, you can do that all from the command line, but it's a lot easier to do it with GitHub when you have a nice interface, then you can compare your code, things like that. And one of the most important parts of GitHub is that it's a tool for collaboration. And so you can get many people working on the same project at once without having to micromanage everyone's work, right? For example, the repository for the popular code editor Visual Studio Code has over 15,000 unique contributors, I think. And we also do that with the FreeCodeCamp OKC website. We have, I don't have the actual numbers for how many people contribute to it, but if you go through the issues, you'll see lots of people have opened up issues, opened up pull requests. And so that helps you work with, or that helps lots of people work on the same project. And the most important feature for that would be forking. Forking takes a copy of someone else's project, it makes a copy on your account so that you can mess around, play with the code without breaking anything. And once you've decided what you want to change, then you can submit that back for review and be like, hey, these are the changes I made. Can we add this in? And so GitHub also lets you open issues, and so that's where you can submit things like bug reports or suggestions for improvement. So if on the FreeCodeCamp website you think, hey, maybe we should add a page about Thunder planes, then you can open up an issue and say, hey, we should add this page. And then you can add your code in, and someone else can review it before they add it in. And so putting all that together, you can think of GitHub as kind of like a social network for developers. So instead of using Facebook and you share pictures of your dog, you use GitHub and share code of your projects. So with that said, let's move on to GitHub Pages. And so GitHub Pages is a service that, according to their front page, they host websites directly from your GitHub repositories. You just edit, push, and your changes are live. So what that means is that we can host static websites. Now that term is, the meaning of that is kind of fuzzy nowadays, especially with a lot of the JavaScript libraries. But what static really means is you don't need any kind of server backend for your site. You just have HTML, CSS, and maybe some JavaScript. And so this is hosted straight from your account. So since you're already using GitHub to store all of your projects, you can host them straight away right from their projects without having to sign up for a different service. And they're all tied to your account. And best of all, it's completely free, which was the one thing that we were concerned about with the other hosting methods. So what this means for us is that, one, we'll write our code. We will initialize Git on the project, more on that later. We'll create a repository on GitHub. We push the code to that repository, and then the website should be live. And so I'll walk through these steps today with you guys. And so first step is writing your code. So Matt already showed us how to write a portfolio site last time, so I won't do that again, and we don't have the time for that. So I'll assume that you're already working on something, or you already have something done. So that's step one. All right. Now step two is initializing Git. And so at this part of the talk, I'd like to cover some bare minimum Git essentials. So a while back, Daniel and Carson, I think, did some more in-depth tutorials about Git, some of the basic features about branching and merging. And so I won't go that in-depth today. I just want to go over what we need in order to get your website up onto GitHub Pages. So the first the high-level overview of the workflow is you initialize a repository on your project. You'll write any code or make any changes to your existing code, which is what I'll be assuming here. You already have something. And you'll add the changes to the staging area. I'll talk more about that in a second. And then you'll commit those changes. So let's kind of run through these commands together. I'll code along with it in a sample project as we go along. So we initialize the repository. And to do that, we just run git init. So let's do that right here. So I have my GitHub Pages intro folder here. And if we look inside, we have a index.html and a CSS folder with a styles.css file inside. And so like I just said, we type git init. So let's do that. And you'll see we have initialize empty git repository. All right, that's it for step one. Step 2 is we can check the status. Now, we can do this at any point, at any time in a project, this by running the command git status. And so what this does is it'll tell you the status of any files in your project. And so we can see here, there's a few, strange messages, but what we're really concerned is we have untracked files. And it shows that we have the CSS folder and the index.html is untracked, it's in red. And so it says here, use git add to include what will be committed. And so that's where we're heading towards for step 3, and that's adding your files. And so like it said in that message, we'll run git add, and we'll run git add dot. And what the dot here stands for is all the files in your current folder plus any subfolders and their files. And so let's run that real quick. All right, so if it doesn't give you any messages, it probably worked fine. And so if we run git status now, you can see that we now have these files changes to be committed, and they're now in green. So what really happened when we added the files is we didn't really make any changes yet. You can think of adding and committing kind of like your shopping cart on Amazon. Before you check out, you can add and remove stuff from your shopping cart. You can decide what you want, kind of change it here and there. And so before we ran git add, the staging area is empty. And so once we run the add command, we added all of those files. We could have ran git add index.html and then git add css/styles.css. We could have done that too, but the git add dot kind of served as a shortcut. And so we added those into the staging area, the shopping cart, if you will. And finally, we'll commit the changes, and this solidifies any change that we have at that moment in time. And so Git is a version control system, and so what that means is that it'll take snapshots of the status of your code at some point in time so that you can come back to it if you need to later. And so when you commit, you're kind of checking out on Amazon, you've decided what you wanted. And to run that, we'll run git commit-m commit message here. So what is a commit message? What a commit message should not be would be anything like this after the first 3 or so. I know people who are guilty of this kind of commit message. You should never, ever do this. If you do this, you may get fired. I don't know. But you should not do this. What you should do is be descriptive, right? Your message should contain a little description of what changes were made. So if you fixed, say, the login page of your application, you should say that. A general convention that most people follow is to use an imperative present tense. And so instead of saying added a new div to index.html, you should say add a new div to index.html. That's just a convention that people like to follow. I find myself correcting myself all the time. And lastly, kind of as a general rule, you want to keep it under 50 characters. It's not a hard, solid rule. It's just a guideline to keep them nice and clean and readable. And so let's run that command here. So run git commit -m specifies we want to type in a message. And so what did we do here? We let's say we add index.html and styles.css to the repo. All right, and so that is actually all we need for initializing Git on the project for now. And actually, I don't have a slide that has this, but if you type in git log, you can check the author and the date of who wrote this commit and the commit message that was in there. And so if you're working on a team of people, you can run git log and you can check who on your team wrote what, at what time, things like that. So going back to our little list of steps earlier, we're done with step 2. So now let's move on to step 3, creating a repository in GitHub. So this part should be nice and short here. So we'll go over to GitHub and we'll create a new repository on our account called your username.github.io. So if you haven't signed up for an account on GitHub already, you should probably do so. And so I have my secondary account here. So I'll click the plus here and click new repository. And so for the name, it was the username.github.io. And the rest of the settings are fine as they are. We'll hit create repository. All right, that's the first bit. Second, we'll add the remote URL. This gives Git the location where you want to push your code to, where you want to upload your code to. And so you want to put it up onto GitHub servers so that they can host it for you. And if you actually look on your new repository, or push an existing repository from the command line, and there are the instructions here that you can literally copy and paste, and they should work. So let's do that. Actually, on my machine, I have to make a quick change here since I have something wonky with my SSH keys. So again, there's no error messages, so that should be fine. And then next, we'll push the code, and it's git push-u origin master. That's a lot of, that's kind of cryptic if you don't use Git. We won't get into the details for now. If we have time later, maybe we can go more into that. But for now, let's just trust GitHub's instructions, and we'll run it. And yeah, looks like it did it. So as you can see here, it wrote the items to the URL that you passed in earlier. And yeah, basically the message that it worked. So you run git status again. Now we'll say nothing to commit, working tree clean. Because now you have not made any more changes since your last commit, which is what we just did. And so in our little checklist here, that was step 3 and 4. That was creating a repository, and we ran git push. And so next is, let's check out and see if it worked. So we'll go back over here, and if we refresh this after you ran git push, you'll now see that you had the CSS folder and the index.html file that we had earlier. So if we head into settings and scroll down, you'll see a GitHub pages here. You'll see your site is published at username.github.io. And if we click it, lo and behold, we have something. I guess I made this by mistake. But yeah, that was, that's the sample index.html that I had on my file. If we take a look at that, it was just an H1 and a paragraph tag with an extra I for some reason. So anyway, so that was the last step. Our website is live. So at this point, that's all we have for the GitHub pages. Now, do we have any questions about any of the procedure that we followed thus far? Yeah, so the question was about the GitHub or git push-u origin. So this one. What was your question again? So git push. Push means you take the code in your folder right now, and it pushes it, it uploads it to the remote URL that we specified up here. And so the -u, you have to kind of run this the first time. Every time after that, you can just run git push, and it should work. -u means set upstream. That basically means it specifies this is where the original repository is, and you should take all the code from here. Any changes you should push from there, and you should pull from there. When you pull, it's like downloading any changes that you made. And origin master. Origin is what we add up here. It's the name of the URL. So we can git remote add work repo, and you can git push work repo master. And master is the default branch, the master branch, the main branch. And we can talk about branches at another time or maybe later. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, if you're working on multiple projects, do we have to specify a different URL? And the answer technically is yes. So that URL is every time so let's say now you want to make a new repo for, say you made a JavaScript calculator, calculator, right? And so once we create that, then it'll give you another URL, and you can see it specifically says username / JavaScript calculator. So what really happens is, in this folder, I'm working in my GHP intro folder right now. And so that's the only folder that I'll use for this project. If I want to make a new project like the JavaScript calculator, I'll make a new JavaScript calculator. And then I'll go into it. And then here I'll run git init again. And so this sets that up. This project is only for that repository. And so you shouldn't really have more than one project going on in the same repo unless they're kind of somewhat related. There's some advanced features where you can use a Git repository within other Git repositories, but usually you want to avoid that. Does that answer the question? Yeah, so each Git init, or so if we run this here, I can demonstrate this real quick. So we run this, and then change this part for my machine. So if you run git remote -v, it'll tell you all of the location where that repository is going. So you can see here that this origin is what we set it to, the JavaScript calculator.git. If we go back and go into here and we run git remote -v, you can run that this one is linked to christopherT.github.io. All right, awesome. Any more questions? Yes?
Yeah, on the concept of forking.
Forking, yes.
Yeah, so is that just for only team and peer helping in that issue, in that type of context? Or my question is, where does forking get to where somebody may try to do that and maybe copy a program or something to where they might say, well, yeah, that may be a good idea, but I think I guess plagiarizing or whatever.
Yeah. So the question is, with forking, is that only for things you work on in teams, or can someone just come along and fork your project and then suddenly your next $1 million idea is now theirs? And so, yeah. So forking, so if we actually just go here right now, and let's go over to the FreeCodeCampOKC, I think it is, /FCC, nope, that's not a slash, FCC OKC web. So this is a repository for the FCC OKC website here. And if I want to fork this, I just click the fork, and it runs a copy machine thing here for a couple seconds because it's forking. And now you can see that this is the repo, and now it's under my name. But you can also see that this is forked from where it went. Now, obviously, that doesn't stop anyone from taking the idea, making it theirs. And so that's where the concept of licenses and things like that come in. You can put in a license.markdown file in there. There are some, what's the word? There's some some standard licenses that you can put on. So you can use one of the licenses that says, anyone can come here, take this code, and do whatever they wish with it. Or there are some licenses that say, you can take this, you can copy it, you can use it, but you cannot use it for commercial purposes. Or some might say, you can use this and do whatever you want with it, but you always have to attribute the original author somewhere in your code. So that does help with people, stealing ideas and things like that. But generally, for forking specifically, anyone can go fork any repository that is public. You can set private repositories that no one else can see except for you and other people that you give permission to. I think you have to pay for that for GitHub. Yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah, so to keep the ideas for yourself, licenses are generally the way to go. You can add a license in there. I don't have anything on me right now that I could demonstrate that, but any more questions? Yeah.
Now that we know how to build a portfolio, now we know how to host it for free, can you think of any excuses why we should not have one?
Excuses, the question was, are there any excuses why we shouldn't have a portfolio now that we know how to build one and host it? For free. For free. No, not really. Not really. If you already have one, then you're fine. Otherwise, no, there's no reason to not have one. Yes. If you want a non-static website as your portfolio, it depends what you mean by non-static. So if your portfolio requires some sort of back end, I don't think that really qualifies as a portfolio anymore. That'd probably be more closer to a web app. But if you need a back end, then you're going to want to use something like Heroku, where you can say, I want a project that runs on Node.js. You can write your app, you push it with using Git. You can actually set a Git remote Heroku URL, and it'll push it and it'll host it. Or you will have to get a cloud server, like I mentioned earlier through AWS, Google Cloud, DigitalOcean. You'll have to spin up your own Linux virtual machine and set up all the backend. There are tools that do help you set up most of the boilerplate a lot of the times, but GitHub pages will only help you do static pages. But if it's something like, say, you want to do some cool WebGL stuff on your portfolio, it'll probably work on GitHub pages. So the word static is kind of iffy at this point. So, yeah.
Can you define static and non-static?
Yeah. So static would be something like my portfolio site, right? Static is I only have a set number of pages, and they don't need to communicate with any server to get any kind of data back. So if you think about Facebook is definitely not static. If everyone goes to facebook.com right now, everyone will see something different on their page. And it goes through Facebook's servers to get any data from specific to your account and puts it up on the page. Whereas for, say, a portfolio website, you see the same thing every time you go there. Does that kind of help clarify it? Yeah. Is there any other analogies for static and non-static? No, because you can also use, if you go through a lot of trouble, you could probably get like some sort of React or Angular project and kind of get data using Ajax, but that still kind of qualifies as static because you don't have a backend. So the main definition here of static is that it does not require a backend server. That is probably the most definitive explanation I can give. Any more questions? All right, so yeah, my name is Chris. You can find me on Slack, occasionally on Twitter, and my GitHub yeah, that is it.